I took a job at a remote oil rig in the North Atlantic. Something rises at night. Jack Harmon stared at the hospital bill until the numbers blurred. $42,000 and climbing. His father's cancer didn't care about their empty bank account or the stack of rejection letters on Jack's kitchen table. 37 of them now, one from every decent-paying job within 50 miles of their coastal Maine hometown. When the phone rang, Jack answered mechanically, expecting another collection agency. "Mr. Harmon, this is Richard Kane from North Star Energy." The voice was crisp, professional. "Your application for our offshore engineering position has been accepted." Jack blinked. He'd applied months ago, forgotten about it entirely. The position pays $180,000 annually, 6 months on, 2 months off. "We need someone immediately. Our last engineer had to be evacuated. How soon can you start?" 3 days later, Jack stood on a helipad in Massachusetts, watching a weathered Bell 412 descend through a ceiling of gray clouds. The pilot, a taciturn man named Willis, barely spoke during the 2-hour flight, except to point out a pod of whales breaching in the slate-colored waters below. "There she is," Willis finally said as they approached. Argus platform. The structure rose from the churning Atlantic like an industrial island, its yellow and rust-colored frame stark against the endless horizon. Even from a distance, Jack could see the wear patches of corrosion, faded paint, jury-rigged repairs. The platform had clearly been operating long past its intended lifespan. As they landed on the helipad, a tall figure emerged, hunched against the wind. Up close, the platform chief, Morrison, looked like he'd aged 20 years in 10. Deep lines carved his leathery face, and his eyes, bloodshot and haunted, darted constantly toward the surrounding ocean. "Welcome to hell," Morrison said, his handshake firm despite trembling fingers. "You'll get used to it." The tour was brief and perfunctory. Morrison pointed out the essential areas: engineering bay, crew quarters, mess hall, control room. The skeleton crew of 15 men nodded curtly as they passed. No one smiled. No one asked questions about Jack's background or offered information about themselves. "Communications room," Morrison said, gesturing to a door secured with both keypad and physical lock. "Off limits, except during scheduled transmissions. Company policy." "What happened to the previous engineer?" Jack asked, as they reached his quarters, a cramped room with a narrow bunk, metal desk, and a single porthole window facing endless ocean. Morrison's face tightened. "Mental health evacuation. This place, it gets to people." He checked his watch. "Sun sets in 40 minutes. After dark, no one goes outside. No exceptions. Weather concerns, something like that." Morrison's eyes flicked toward the window. "Dinner's at 6. Breakfast at 6. Lunch at noon. We keep a schedule here. Helps with the isolation." After Morrison left, Jack unpacked his meager belongings. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and someone else's lingering cologne. In the desk drawer, he found a prescription bottle, label partially torn away, revealing only azepam and is needed for anxiety. As darkness fell, Jack lay in his bunk, listening to the constant mechanical drone of the rig. The platform swayed almost imperceptibly with the waves, a gentle rocking that should have been soothing. But beneath that rhythm, something else pulsed, a deep, resonant humming that seemed to emanate from the ocean itself. At first, Jack thought it was the drilling equipment or generators, but this sound was organic. It rose and fell like breathing. At 2:17 a.m., Jack jolted awake, uncertain what had disturbed him. The humming had stopped, replaced by a scraping sound, massive and deliberate, against the rig's underwater supports. The metal walls around him conducted the vibration, making his teeth ache. Then came the singing, distant and ethereal. It filtered through the platform's metal skeleton, like a ghostly radio transmission. The melody followed no musical scale. Jack recognized The words, if they were words, in no human language. Yet something in the notes reached into his chest and squeezed, conveying a longing so profound it brought unexpected tears to his eyes. Jack pressed his ear against the cold metal wall, straining to hear better. The singing abruptly ceased. In the silence that followed, he heard footsteps passing his door, slow, measured steps that paused momentarily before continuing down the corridor. He opened his door a crack. At the far end of the dimly lit hallway, Morrison stood facing a maintenance hatch, his forehead pressed against the metal, both palms splayed on either side. The platform chief was whispering something, his shoulders shaking. Jack quietly closed his door and sat on the edge of his bunk until morning, watching the porthole lighten from black to gray as the North Atlantic dawn crawled across the water. His father's medication wouldn't pay for itself. 6 months, he just needed to last 6 months. The rhythms of rig life settled into Jack's bones during that first week. The constant machinery hum, the clank of metal walkways, the taste of salt that permeated everything. These became his new normal. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, their interactions minimal, functional. They were men who had learned to say only what needed saying. Breakfast was powdered eggs and coffee, strong enough to strip paint. Lunch was sandwiches with meat of questionable origin. Dinner varied between pasta and mystery stew. No one complained. "You're the new Hodges," said a wiry technician named Crow, joining Jack at his table on the 4th day. That's what they called the last guy. "What happened to him?" Jack asked, poking at his spaghetti. Crow's eyes darted to where Morrison sat alone, reading maintenance reports. Official story as he cracked up. Started hearing things, seeing things. He lowered his voice. "Truth is, we all hear things out here. Hodges just made the mistake of talking about it too much." Jack thought of the singing, the scraping sounds. What kind of things? Ask too many questions. You'll find yourself on the next chopper out. Crow tapped his temple. Or worse, they'll decide you're too valuable to let go. He stood abruptly. Word of advice: do your job, keep your head down, and don't go wandering after dark. In the engineering bay, Jack found chaos. Maintenance logs were incomplete. Equipment modifications undocumented. Systems that should have been replaced years ago had been patched repeatedly, held together with improvisation and luck. "Why is the backup generator wired to bypass the emergency shutdown?" Jack asked Riggs, the head of maintenance, a heavy-set man with nicotine-stained fingers. "Ask Morrison," Riggs muttered. "Company specs, he says." The communication system particularly troubled Jack. Despite having state-of-the-art satellite equipment, it frequently malfunctioned, especially at night. Yet diagnostics showed nothing wrong. On his 6th night, unable to sleep, Jack decided to check the comm system himself. The corridors were deserted, lit by dim emergency lighting. He passed Morrison's office, surprised to see light beneath the door at 2 a.m. In the control room, Jack booted up the diagnostic program. Everything showed normal, yet the satellite link was dead. He traced connections, finding nothing amiss until he reached a junction box near the exterior wall. Inside was an addition to the circuit, an unmarked black module connected to the main communication line. It wasn't on any schematic, had no manufacturer's mark. A modification light on its surface pulsed in an irregular pattern. As Jack studied it, the module suddenly emitted a high-pitched tone. Simultaneously, the scraping sound against the rig's supports resumed, louder than before, more urgent. The overhead lights flickered, then went out completely. In the darkness, red emergency lights activated, casting the control room in a bloody glow. The singing began again, closer now, seeming to emanate from the walls themselves. This time Jack was certain he could almost understand words within the eerie melody, like a language he'd once known, but forgotten. A hand clamped onto his shoulder. Jack spun around to find Morrison, face half hidden in shadow. "What are you doing here?" Morrison demanded, his eyes reflecting the red emergency light like an animal's. "Communication troubleshooting," Jack said, gesturing to the open junction box. "What's this module?" Morrison slammed the junction box shut. "Company equipment. Classified. You're not authorized. It's interfering with the satellite link."
"It's supposed to."
Morrison's hand remained on Jack's shoulder, fingers digging in painfully. "You need to return to your quarters." "The singing," Jack began. Morrison's expression hardened. "There is no singing. There are no sounds. This is an oil rig in the middle of the ocean. Metal expands and contracts. Waves hit the supports. The wind plays tricks." His grip tightened. "Understand?" Jack nodded slowly. "Good." Morrison released him. "Because people who hear things that aren't there end up like Hodges. You know what happened to Hodges?" "Mental health evacuation," Jack recited. "That's right."
He heard things that weren't there.
Started talking about them. Started writing things down. Morrison leaned closer.
"Don't be like Hodges."
As they exited the control room, Jack noticed what looked like burn scars on Morrison's neck, disappearing beneath his collar, unusual marks that formed a pattern like gills. The next morning at breakfast, Jack found Crow and asked about the module in the communication system. "Don't know what you're talking about," Crow said, but his eyes betrayed him. The black box interfering with satellite communications. Crow pushed his tray away. "Listen carefully. There are two types who survive out here. Those who don't notice things, and those who notice but keep their mouths shut." He stood up. "Figure out which one you are before it's too late." That afternoon, a crew member named Jenkins didn't show up for his shift. The others exchanged glances, but said nothing. When Jack asked about him, Riggs simply said, "Transferred, happens all the time." But later, Jack overheard Morrison on the radio. "Yes. Another sleepwalking incident. No body recovered. Standard report." Morrison's voice changed, becoming almost reverent. "They're getting bolder, coming closer. I think they're trying to tell us something." That night, Jack lay awake, listening to the ocean's secrets, wondering if his sanity or his life would be the first to go. 2 weeks into his contract, Jack was assigned to repair faulty wiring in the control room's east wall panel. The job was straightforward. Locate the short, replace the damaged section, seal it back up. But when he removed the panel, he found something unexpected. A small cavity behind the circuit breakers, and within it, a leather-bound book wrapped in plastic. Jack glanced over his shoulder. He was alone. Morrison occupied with a supply inventory in the warehouse bay. Carefully, Jack extracted the book and examined it. The cover was unmarked, the leather cracked with age. Inside, the first entry was dated April 17, 1973. The platform's commissioning date, according to the faded dedication plaque in the mess hall. "Drilling commenced today at Argus platform," read the neat handwriting. "Depth 1,870 feet below seabed. First crew reports optimal conditions. No anomalies." Jack flipped forward several pages. June 3, 1973. First anomalous sonar readings. Chief Engineer Donovan reports unusual echo patterns from beneath drilling site. Dismissed as equipment malfunction. June 21, 1973. Night crew reports hearing singing from ocean. Psychological evaluation ordered for all personnel reporting auditory phenomena. Jack's heart quickened. The entries continued chronologically, handwriting changing, as different platform chiefs took over record-keeping duties. Every few pages, a common term appeared: deep ones. March 8, 1977. Third visitation by deep ones. 2 entities observed from South Observation Deck, described as humanoid but with fish-like characteristics. Entities retreated when spotlights activated. September 14, 1982. Technician Garza missing after night shift. Security footage shows him walking deliberately into ocean at 2:17 a.m. No body recovered. Company classifies as suicide. The pattern repeated across decades. Sightings, disappearances, strange phenomena, all documented meticulously, then officially dismissed or reclassified. North Star Energy's response was always the same: continue operations, replace personnel, maintain secrecy. The entries from the past year, written in what Jack recognized as Morrison's increasingly erratic handwriting, detailed an escalation. November 19th, 2024. They're trying to communicate through our systems now. During power fluctuations, monitors display symbols resembling Proto-Sumerian script. Dr. Rivera suggests similarity to imagery found at underwater archaeological site near Yonaguni. December 3rd, 2024. Direct contact made. Entity touched my hand during night inspection of lower platform. Skin cold, slick, but not slimy. 3 hours of missing time afterward. Strange marks appeared on neck and back. Medical officer says they're burn patterns, but they don't hurt. January 28th, 2025. They speak in my head now. They say we're drilling into something we shouldn't, something that keeps them dormant. They call it the ancient binding. Every barrel we extract weakens the seal. The final entry was dated just 3 days before Jack's arrival. Engineer Hodges accessed restricted files, attempted unauthorized transmission to mainland. Security team removed him. I told the new hire it was a mental breakdown. May God forgive me. The deep ones say God is a child's story. They say there are older things beneath the waves, older than human understanding, and we're waking them up. A noise in the corridor sent Jack scrambling to return the logbook to its hiding place. He barely had the panel back in position when Riggs entered. Finding everything all right? The maintenance head asked, eyes narrowing suspiciously. Just a corroded wire, Jack replied, keeping his voice steady. Simple fix. That night, Jack began his own observations, noting patterns in the strange occurrences. The humming came at regular intervals, approximately every 4 hours. The scraping against the supports intensified during the new moon, when darkness was absolute, and the singing, that beautiful, terrible singing, always began at precisely 2:17 a.m. He started tracking the drilling schedule against the phenomena. When extraction rates increased, so did the frequency and intensity of the visitations. The correlation was undeniable. 3 days after finding the logbook, Jack noticed something new in the water surrounding the platform. Bioluminescent patches, glowing with an ethereal blue-green light, appeared each night, expanding in size and brightness. The pattern they formed resembled the strange symbols Morrison had mentioned. Proto-Sumerian, like a message written in living light. Jack wasn't the only one watching. From his window, he observed Morrison standing on the restricted lower deck each night, arms outstretched toward the glowing water, mouth moving in what appeared to be conversation. The platform chief no longer bothered hiding the marks on his neck. They had spread, forming intricate patterns that pulsed with the same bioluminescent glow as the water. When their paths crossed in the corridor, Morrison smiled knowingly. "You've seen the book," he said. It wasn't a question. "I don't know what you mean," Jack replied carefully. Morrison's eyes, once bloodshot, now held an unnatural iridescence. "They know you, Jack. They've always known you would come. Some things are written in deeper currents than fate." He leaned closer, his breath smelling of salt water, though they were 100 feet above the ocean. "Do you hear them singing to you yet? Do you understand the words?" Jack said nothing. "You will," Morrison promised, patting Jack's shoulder with a hand that felt too cold, too damp. "We all do eventually. The ocean gets into your blood out here, especially when your blood gets into the ocean." That night, a violent storm hit the platform. As wind howled and waves crashed against the supports, something massive collided with the underwater structure. The entire platform groaned, metal protesting as though being crushed by enormous pressure. In the chaos, Jack made his way to the control room, finding it empty except for Morrison, who stood transfixed before the monitors. Each screen displayed the same symbol, a spiral pattern with angular protrusions that hurt Jack's eyes to look at directly. "What's happening?" Jack demanded. Morrison turned, his expression serene despite the emergency sirens. "They're coming up," he said simply. "The storm is their gateway. They've waited long enough." As if in confirmation, the communication system suddenly activated, broadcasting the now familiar singing throughout the platform. But this time, to Jack's horror, he realized he could understand fragments of the message. "Rise, surface, time, the binding fails." The storm intensified overnight, transforming the North Atlantic into a maelstrom of 30-foot waves and howling winds that isolated Argus platform from the outside world. Primary communications failed completely, no surprise to Jack now, and the emergency backup system reported atmospheric interference too severe for transmission. Morning brought no relief. The scheduled supply helicopter didn't appear, couldn't have flown in such conditions, even if it had tried. The crew gathered in the mess hall, tension thick in the recycled air. "We've weathered worse," Riggs announced, though his darting eyes betrayed his uncertainty. "Morrison says we'll ride it out." "Where is Morrison?" Jack asked, noticing the platform chief's absence. "His quarters. Says he's not feeling well." Riggs exchanged glances with Crow. "Wants to be left alone." As the day progressed, the collision damage from the night before revealed itself in concerning ways. Pressure alarms triggered in the lower levels. Pipes leaked. Support struts showed stress fractures. Jack and a technician named Vasquez spent hours making emergency repairs in the bowels of the platform. "Something hit us hard," Vasquez muttered, as they welded a cracked joint. "Too hard for just debris." "What do you think it was?" Jack asked, testing the waters. Vasquez's eyes flickered to him, then away. "Don't know. Don't want to know." He finished the weld and packed up his tools with deliberate movements. "My contract ends in 2 weeks. I'm getting off this rig and never coming back. You should too if you're smart." When the repairs were complete, Jack made his way to Morrison's quarters, determined to confront the platform chief. The corridor leading to the senior staff wing was oddly humid, condensation beading on the metal walls, a faint smell of seawater, and something else, something organic and ancient, permeated the air. Jack knocked. No answer. He tried the handle, unlocked. Inside, Morrison's quarters were in disarray. Wet footprints tracked across the floor. Star charts and nautical maps covered the walls, marked with incomprehensible notations. On Morrison's desk sat an open bottle of whiskey beside a small black device resembling the module Jack had found in the communication system. Morrison himself stood at the far window, staring out at the storm-tossed ocean, his silhouette stark against the gray light. He didn't turn when Jack entered. "They're coming," Morrison said, voice oddly calm. "The storm tears the veil between their world and ours. They've been patient, but the balance is failing." "What are you talking about?" Jack demanded. "What hit us last night?" Morrison finally turned. The transformation Jack had glimpsed was now impossible to ignore. The platform chief's skin had a grayish cast, and the gill-like markings on his neck pulsed with a subtle luminescence. His eyes had changed completely, the whites now silvery, the irises expanded and vertical like a cat's or a reptile's. "A messenger," Morrison answered. "One of the smaller ones. A warning." He gestured to the whiskey. "Have a drink, Jack. It's easier with something in your system." Jack remained in the doorway. What happened to Hodges? He learned too much too quickly, couldn't handle it. Tried to send a distress signal with classified information. Morrison's mouth twisted into something approximating a smile. "The company has protocols for such breaches." "And Jenkins, the missing technician?" "He went to them willingly. Some do. The ocean calls to certain people. Morrison turned back to the window. They were here before us. Way before us. We drilled into something we shouldn't have. Not oil. Something else. Something that keeps them dormant, and now it's leaking away. A massive wave crashed against the platform, making the entire structure shudder. I need answers, Morrison. Real ones. Look in the top drawer, Morrison said without turning. The file is codenamed ABSL Dawn. Security clearance won't matter now. Jack crossed to the desk and found a worn manila folder. Inside were documents stamped with security classifications and North Star energy watermarks. The first page bore the title, Project Abyssal Dawn, Containment and Extraction Protocol. As Jack read, the blood drained from his face. According to the documents, Argus platform had never been primarily about oil. Geological surveys in the early 1970s had discovered a strange substance beneath the seabed, a viscous, black material with unusual properties, unofficially dubbed abyssal serum. The substance contained compounds unknown to science, including organic elements that seemed to absorb and store energy. More disturbing were the notes on the substance's relationship to the deep-sea entities. The serum appeared to keep them in a dormant state, functioning as a natural containment mechanism for something referred to only as the ancient binding. North Star had been extracting the serum along with petroleum for decades, gradually weakening this binding. My God, Jack whispered. They knew. They always knew, Morrison confirmed, still gazing at the churning waters. First it was just research, scientific curiosity. Then they discovered the serum's properties. Energy storage, 1,000 times more efficient than any battery. Biological components that interface with neural tissue. Do you have any idea what that's worth? Jack continued reading. The final pages detailed experiments conducted on platform personnel, testing the effects of controlled exposure to the serum. Subjects developed enhanced senses, resistance to pressure and cold, and most valuable to North Star, the ability to perceive and partially communicate with the deep-sea entities. A photograph slipped from the file. Morrison in a laboratory setting, strapped to a table, black fluid being injected into his neck at precisely the locations where the gill-like markings now pulsed. You're one of their test subjects, Jack said. Morrison laughed, a hollow sound barely audible over the storm. I was, now I'm something else. A bridge, perhaps, or a sacrifice. He turned from the window, eyes gleaming in the dim light. They're coming up tonight, Jack, all of them, and they're bringing something with them. The drilling. We need to stop it, Jack said, thinking rapidly. Too late. Morrison touched his neck, fingers trailing over the pulsing markings. The binding is already failing, but they don't want destruction, Jack. That's what I've been trying to tell the company for months. They want communion. Thunder cracked directly overhead, and the lights went out completely. In the sudden darkness, Morrison's markings glowed bright enough to illuminate his face from below. They're here, he whispered. The emergency lights activated, bathing the room in crimson. Through the window behind Morrison, Jack saw it, a massive shape rising from the waves, bioluminescent patterns swirling across its surface. Not a creature, exactly, but something that defied categorization, part architecture, part organism, ancient beyond comprehension. The radio on Morrison's desk crackled to life, broadcasting that haunting singing, but now Jack understood fragments of words. The gateway opens, the sleeper stirs, the binding fails. Morrison smiled, the expression almost beatific. They've been waiting for someone who could understand, someone who could help. That's why they let you find the logbook, Jack. That's why they called you here. I don't understand, Jack said, backing toward the door. You will. Morrison's voice had changed, resonating with harmonic undertones. We all serve the deep in the end. Another impact rocked the platform, harder than before. Alarm sirens blared throughout the rig. Over the intercom, Riggs's panicked voice ordered all personnel to emergency stations. Jack ran, Morrison's laughter following him down the corridor, echoing with sounds no human throat should make. The storm persisted for days, a weather anomaly that meteorological services would later struggle to explain. Massive cloud formations circled Argus platform like predators, lightning illuminating the churning waters, where bioluminescent patterns grew increasingly complex and widespread. Within the rig, systems failed one after another. Backup generators strained to provide essential power. The crew, now down to 12, worked in exhausted shifts to maintain critical functions. No one mentioned the shapes occasionally glimpsed moving beneath the waves, or the strange growths that had begun appearing on the platform's underwater supports, organic structures that pulsed with the same ethereal light as the patterns in the water. Jack examined these growths through the observation port in the lowest level. They resembled coral but behaved like something alive and intelligent, forming structures that mimicked the spiral symbol he'd seen on the control room monitors. When he touched the glass barrier separating him from the growth, it responded, reaching tendrils toward his fingers, as though sensing his presence. "It's spreading faster than before," said Crow, joining him at the viewport. The technician looked haggard, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. "You've seen this before?" Crow nodded grimly. 3 years ago. Not this bad. They cleared it with underwater torches, chemical treatments, killed 2 divers in the process. Something in the water dissolved their suits, their skin. He shuddered at the memory. But it always comes back, like it's part of the rig now. Or the rig is becoming part of it, Jack murmured. Their eyes met in shared understanding. Neither needed to state the obvious. Argus platform was being transformed, colonized by something not of their world. That evening, the drinking water developed a faint metallic taste. Morrison, now rarely seen outside his quarters, assured them through the intercom that it remained potable, merely mineral contamination from the backup filtration system. The crew drank it despite their misgivings. There was no alternative. That night, Jack dreamed of drowning in darkness while surrounded by watching eyes. He jolted awake to find Vasquez standing over his bunk, eyes open but unseeing, mouth moving in silent communion with something Jack couldn't perceive. "Vasquez," Jack whispered, reaching for the technician's arm. Vasquez blinked, awareness returning slowly. "I was walking," he said, confusion evident. "I was walking into the water. They were calling me." Jack led him back to his quarters, noticing how the other man's skin felt clammy, how his eyes had begun developing the same silvery sheen as Morrison's. In the morning, Vasquez couldn't remember the incident, but during breakfast, Jack noticed others showing similar symptoms, slight physical changes, momentary dissociations, shared references to dreams of drowning, while something ancient whispered secrets. The water, Jack realized. Something in the water was changing them. He needed to find communications equipment that worked, something not compromised by Morrison or North Star's modifications. In the engineering bay, he located an emergency transponder designed to activate automatically if the platform sank, a self-contained system with its own power supply and satellite link. Jack worked feverishly to modify it, creating a makeshift transmitter. If he could broadcast just one message to the mainland, reveal what was happening at Argus. He was soldering the final connection when the door opened. Riggs entered, followed by 2 crew members Jack barely recognized, their features subtly altered, movements too fluid for men who'd spent their lives on metal platforms above the ocean. "What are you doing, Harmon?" Riggs asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Maintenance," Jack lied, casually sliding the transponder beneath a stack of requisition forms. Riggs approached, eyes narrowing. The maintenance head had changed since Jack's arrival. His once solid frame now moved with unsettling grace. and faint lines that might have been incipient gill markings had appeared on his neck. "Morrison wants to see you," Riggs said. "Control room, now." Jack had no choice but to comply, leaving his work unfinished. As they walked, he noticed more changes throughout the platform. The constant condensation on the walls had developed patterns, subtle whirls and spirals that caught the light at certain angles. The air tasted increasingly of salt and something else, something ancient and organic. In the control room, Morrison stood before the main console. The platform chief had abandoned any pretense of normality. His transformation had progressed dramatically, skin now a mottled gray-green, eyes completely silver with vertical pupils, neck gills fully formed and pulsing visibly. When he spoke, his voice carried those same harmonic undertones, as though multiple voices emerged simultaneously. "You've been busy, Jack," Morrison said, gesturing to a monitor displaying security footage of Jack working on the transponder, like Hodges, always trying to call home. "Where is Hodges now?" Jack demanded. "You said he was evacuated." Morrison smiled, revealing teeth that had sharpened to points. In a manner of speaking, the helicopter that came for him didn't go back to the mainland. He touched a control, changing the monitor display to a weather map. "We have another visitor approaching, a hurricane, Category 5, building quickly, unusual for this time of year." The massive storm system on the screen was unlike anything Jack had seen. A perfect spiral, with an eye aimed directly at Argus platform, as though guided by intelligence rather than natural forces. "The company is tracking it," Morrison continued. "They've made their decision. No evacuation, no warning. They're letting nature solve their problem." His silver eyes fixed on Jack. "We're the problem they want erased." "They're going to let us die out here," Jack said, the full horror dawning on him. "Die? No. Transform, perhaps. Join. Become." Morrison gestured toward the windows, where the bioluminescent patterns in the water had grown so bright they illuminated the platform from below, casting everything in ethereal blue-green light. "The hurricane isn't natural, Jack. It's their doing, their gateway." A new alarm blared, flooding on the lower levels. Riggs and his altered companions rushed to respond, leaving Jack alone with Morrison. "I found something else in your quarters," Jack said, playing his final card. The records of Hodges' last transmission attempt. What he discovered about the drilling operation. Morrison's expression shifted, something like fear crossing his inhuman features. "I completed his work," Jack lied. "The transmission is cued to broadcast automatically if I don't reset it every 6 hours. Everything, the serum, the experiments, the entities, it all goes public." It was a desperate bluff, but it hit its mark. Morrison hissed, a sound no human could make. "The surface world isn't ready. They'll destroy everything in their ignorance and fear." "Then tell me the truth," Jack demanded. "All of it. What's really down there? What are you becoming? What do they want?" Morrison approached, moving with a fluidity that suggested his bones had altered along with his skin. "Come, see for yourself." He led Jack to the communication room, unlocking the reinforced door with trembling fingers. Inside was not the satellite equipment Jack expected, but a chamber transformed. The walls were covered with the same organic growth Jack had seen on the underwater supports, pulsating with bioluminescent light. In the center stood what had once been communications equipment, now merged with the growth into a bizarre hybrid of technology and living tissue. Tendrils of the material wrapped around monitors and control panels. The screens displayed the same symbols Jack had seen before, but constantly shifting, evolving. "This is what Hodges found," Morrison said, caressing a pulsing tendril with disturbing affection. "Our true purpose, not just to extract the serum, but to establish contact, a bridge between worlds." "What happened to him?" Jack asked, already suspecting the answer. Morrison gestured to a dark corner of the room. There, partially embedded in the organic growth, was what remained of a human form, a body being slowly absorbed and transformed. Eyes still open but clouded with the same silver sheen. Hodge's mouth moved slightly, forming words without sound. Jack recoiled in horror. "You're monsters." "No," Morrison said softly. "We're becoming something greater than human. The serum changes us, prepares us for communion. Some resist, fight the transformation. Hodges fought. Others, like me, embrace it." He spread his arms, gill markings fluttering. "They've been patient, Jack, waiting millennia for the right moment, the right vessels, and now the binding weakens. They will rise." Outside, the platform shuddered as another massive wave struck. The storm was intensifying, the hurricane approaching faster than any natural phenomenon should. "What binding?" Jack demanded. "What are they?" "Gods," Morrison whispered, eyes wide with reverence. "The old ones who ruled before humanity crawled from the ocean. They were sealed away by something else, something that feared them. The serum is part of that binding, a chemical lock on a cosmic prison." He laughed, the sound bubbling like water, "and we've been harvesting it for profit, barrel by barrel, key by key." Jack backed toward the door, mind racing. The hurricane, their final gateway. When it hits, the boundary between worlds will thin completely. They will rise from the deep, reclaim the surface. Morrison's face contorted with ecstasy. "And those of us who have accepted the change will be their priests in the new world." As if in confirmation, the organic material coating the walls pulsed brighter, and a new sound emerged. Not the haunting singing Jack had heard before, but a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through his bones and made his vision blur. He fled the communication room, Morrison's laughter following him down the corridor. In the distance, alarm systems blared as another section of the platform flooded. The hurricane was less than 6 hours away, according to the monitors Jack passed. North Star Energy had abandoned them all to whatever fate awaited when the storm hit. Jack knew he had to act quickly. The emergency transponder remained his only hope of warning the outside world. Not that he expected rescue, but someone needed to know what was happening here, what might soon be happening everywhere, if the entities rose from their ancient prison. As he raced toward the engineering bay, he passed Vasquez in the corridor. The technician's transformation had accelerated dramatically, skin glistening with moisture, eyes completely silver, neck splitting to reveal nascent gills. "They're singing to me, Jack," Vasquez said, voice distorted by his changing vocal cords. "They're so beautiful. Why don't you hear them yet?" Jack pushed past him, no longer bothering to hide his intentions. Behind him, Vasquez called out in that same distorted voice, "You can't stop it, Jack. The water rises, the binding fails. We all return to the deep in the end." Jack barricaded himself in the engineering bay, using equipment racks to block the door. Only 4 crew members remained untransformed enough to help him. Crow, a roughneck named Lawson, the cook Parker, and a young electrical technician called Rodriguez. They gathered around the modified emergency transponder, faces grim in the dim emergency lighting. "We need to warn someone," Jack explained, connecting the final wires. "Even if we don't make it, people need to know what's happening here." "Who's going to believe us?" Lawson asked, his voice hoarse from shouting over the escalating storm. "Sea monsters, living oil. They'll think we're crazy." "Then we send data, not stories," Jack said, retrieving the files he'd stolen from Morrison's quarters. Rodriguez, the youngest of them, trembled visibly. "What about us? Is there any way off this rig?" Jack met his eyes honestly. "The lifeboats are gone, either washed away or deliberately disabled. The helicopter pad is compromised. Our best chance is to broadcast an SOS and hold out until help arrives." If help arrives, hung unspoken in the air between them. Outside their makeshift fortress, the storm raged with unnatural fury. The platform groaned under the assault of massive waves. Through the small window, Jack could see the sky had turned an impossible color, a greenish black like bruised flesh, shot through with lightning that moved in patterns rather than random forks. While Crow and Lawson reinforced the barricade, Jack worked on the transponder, connecting it to the platform's main data terminal. As he accessed the system, he discovered something unexpected: patterns in the electronic interference, similar to the symbols he'd seen in the communication room. "They're in the computers too," he murmured, "not just the physical structures." A realization dawned on him. If the entities could interface with electronic systems, perhaps that interface worked both ways. Perhaps there was a way to translate, to truly understand what they wanted. Jack began writing code, a makeshift translation algorithm based on the patterns he'd observed in both the bioluminescent growths and the electronic interference. It was desperate improvisation, intuitive leaps rather than proper programming, but he had nothing to lose. Hours passed. As the hurricane drew closer, the barricade shuddered repeatedly as something, or several somethings, tried to breach it from the corridor. Voices called out, Morrison's among them, sometimes pleading, sometimes threatening, but always with that strange harmonic quality that marked their transformation. "They're trying to get in through the ventilation system," Parker warned, pointing to a grate where tendrils of the organic growth had begun to emerge. Rodriguez sealed it with welding equipment, the smell of burning organic matter filling the room with an acrid stench. "That won't hold for long," he warned. The translation program finally compiled, and Jack connected it to the platform's sensors, sonar, communications, even the simple microphones used for the intercom system. If the entities were trying to communicate, he would give them every possible input method. "What exactly are you doing?" Crow asked, watching Jack's frantic work. "They keep trying to tell us something," Jack explained. "Morrison thinks it's about joining them, becoming like them. But what if he's wrong? What if there's more to it?" A massive impact rocked the platform, throwing them all to the floor. The lights flickered, then stabilized. Outside, the eye of the hurricane was visible on the horizon, a perfect circle of calm at the center of chaos, bearing down on them with impossible speed. "We're out of time," Jack said, activating the program. Through every speaker in the room came the familiar singing, but now processed through his algorithm. The sound was still alien and unsettling, but fragments became almost comprehensible. "Surface danger, Ancient One stirs, containment failing." Jack adjusted parameters, refining the translation. "Not invasion, warning, the serum binds the sleeper below. If freed, all perish." "They're not trying to invade," Jack said, understanding dawning. "They're trying to warn us." Another impact, harder than before. Metal screamed as something breached the lower levels of the platform. Alarms blared throughout the rig, warning us about what? Parker demanded. Before Jack could answer, the barricade gave way. Behind him clustered the transformed crew, their bodies altered in disturbing ways. Elongated limbs, skin textured like fish scales, eyes reflecting light like deep-sea creatures. "It's time, Jack," Morrison said, voice resonating with multiple harmonics. "The eye of the storm approaches. The gateway opens." Jack stood his ground. "You've misunderstood them. They're not gods, Morrison. They're guardians." Morrison tilted his head, confusion crossing his inhuman features. Jack continued, the pieces finally falling into place. "The serum isn't imprisoning them. It's helping them contain something else. Something worse. The real Old One." He turned up the volume on the translated broadcast. "Beneath the seabed, ancient enemy sleeps. We guard the prison. Humans break the seals. Drilling releases the binding. Catastrophe comes." A new series of impacts shook the platform, but these weren't from the storm or the entities. These came from far below, massive, deliberate blows against the very seabed beneath them. Morrison's silver eyes widened with the first flicker of fear. "They lied to you," Jack said. "Or you heard what you wanted to hear. They're desperate, Morrison. We've been helping release something they've been containing for millennia." As if in confirmation, a new sound rose from the depths, not the haunting melody of the entities, but a deep, resonant pulsing that made blood vessel burst in Lawson's nose, that caused Rodriguez to clap his hands over his ears in agony. Through the window, Jack saw it, a massive shape rising from the depths, dwarfing the entities they'd glimpsed before. This was no bioluminescent beauty, but a dark absence, a void in the shape of something ancient and vast, pulling light and matter into itself like a living black hole. The translated broadcast became frantic. "Too late, the Guardian fails. The Ancient One wakes. Flee if you can warn others." Morrison collapsed to his knees, transformed features contorting in anguish. "They used us," he moaned. "Used me." A vision struck them all simultaneously, not through the speakers or monitors, but directly into their minds. A civilization deep beneath the ocean floor, not invaders but refugees, retreated from the surface world eons ago, to escape something they had accidentally awakened. Guardians left behind, evolving over millennia into the entities they'd encountered, maintaining the prison of something too vast and terrible to comprehend, something that slumbered beneath the seabed, dreaming of consumption and void. The visions showed the serum, not oil but a biological compound, created by the ancient civilization, designed to maintain the binding that kept the sleeper contained, and they showed the drilling operation, each barrel extracted weakening the prison, each experiment with the serum disrupting the careful balance maintained for thousands of years. As the vision faded, Jack found himself on his knees, nose bleeding, ears ringing. The others were in similar states, even the transformed crew members. Only Morrison remained standing, his transformation accelerating rapidly, body elongating and skin splitting to reveal something less and more than human beneath. "The hurricane," Jack gasped, understanding the final piece. "North Star knows. They're using the storm to destroy the evidence." "Yes," Morrison confirmed, voice barely recognizable. "They always planned to abandon this site, move to a deeper location, start again." The platform lurched violently, supports beginning to fail. Through the window, Jack could see the eye of the hurricane, almost upon them. Not natural weather, but a thinning of reality itself, a gateway between worlds. And beneath them, something vast and ancient was rising, awakened by human greed and hubris after eons of slumber. "There's still a chance," Jack said, turning back to the console. "If we can reverse the process, return the serum instead of extracting it, maybe we can strengthen the binding again." "Impossible," Morrison said. "The drilling equipment isn't designed to inject, only extract." Jack's engineering mind raced. "We can reconfigure the system, reverse the flow, use the platform itself as a delivery mechanism." Morrison stared at him with silver eyes, something like hope flickering in their inhuman depths. "It would require someone at the controls, someone to remain until the end." Their eyes met in understanding. If there was any chance to contain what was awakening, to prevent whatever catastrophe would follow its full emergence, someone would have to stay behind. "Get the others to the emergency raft," Jack told Crow. "There's still a chance you can clear the storm's perimeter before it hits." Crow nodded grimly. "What about you?" Jack looked at the console, then at Morrison's transformed figure. As Crow led the remaining crew members toward the last hope of escape, Jack turned to Morrison. "Show me how to access the drilling controls." Outside, lightning fractured the sky in impossible patterns. As the eye of the hurricane, the gateway, opened directly above Argus platform. The eye of the hurricane hung directly over Argus platform, a perfect circle of unnatural calm, surrounded by raging winds. The sea beneath had gone eerily still, black as obsidian, and reflecting the strange lights that danced across the sky. Not aurora or lightning, but fractures in reality itself. Jack and Morrison worked frantically in the drilling control center, reconfiguring systems never designed for reversal. The platform shuddered continuously as something massive pushed upward from the seabed below, the ancient enemy awakening from its prison of millennia. "The main pumps won't handle the viscosity," Jack muttered, fingers flying across the controls. "We need to bypass the safety protocols." Morrison, now barely recognizable as the man who had greeted Jack upon his arrival, manipulated controls with elongated fingers. His transformation had progressed to its final stage, skin translucent and mottled, eyes entirely silver, neck split open to reveal fully formed gills that pulsed in the air. "The serum reservoir," Morrison said, voice bubbling as though speaking through water. "We've stored extracted material in the north tank, nearly 2,000 barrels. Will it be enough?" Jack asked. Morrison's inhuman eyes met his. "No. But it might slow the awakening. Buy time." Outside the reinforced windows, Jack could see the entities, now dozens of them, swimming through air as easily as water, in the altered physics of the gateway. Their bodies glowed with bioluminescent patterns, beautiful and terrible. They circled the platform like sentinels, or perhaps supplicants, awaiting the emergence of something far greater and more terrible than themselves. Below, the ocean bulged upward, as though something vast was pressing against it from beneath. The seabed itself was rupturing, sensors showing fissures opening in formations that had been stable for millions of years. "We're almost ready," Jack said, making the final connections. "Once we start, the platform's structural integrity will fail within minutes. The pressure will be too great." Morrison nodded, a strangely human gesture from his inhuman form. "I will remain at the controls. You should join the others." Jack glanced toward the emergency exit, where Crow and the survivors had departed in the rig's last inflatable raft, their small craft already a distant speck on the unnaturally calm waters within the hurricane's eye. "No one's making it out of here," Jack said quietly. Perhaps Morrison acknowledged, "But they must try, as we must." Jack checked the final calculations. They would need to override every safety protocol, push the machinery far beyond its design parameters. The platform's pumps would pull the stored serum from the reservoir tanks and inject it back into the rupturing seabed, a desperate attempt to restore the binding, to strengthen the ancient prison walls before the sleeper fully awoke. "Why did you do it?" Jack asked suddenly. "Submit to the experiments? Let them change you?" Morrison's transformed features shifted in what might have been a smile. At first, for advancement, special bonuses, career opportunities. His gill slits pulsed with emotion. Later, because I believed I was chosen for transcendence. The entities, the guardians, they spoke to me, showed me visions of evolution, of becoming something greater. They manipulated you, Jack said. Used North Star's greed, used human ambition. Yes, Morrison admitted. But perhaps with reason. Perhaps they needed vessels, intermediaries, who could understand both worlds. He gestured to his transformed body. This form can survive what comes next. Yours cannot. Before Jack could respond, alarms blared throughout the platform. On the monitors, sensor readings spiked wildly. Something was emerging. Through the reinforced windows, Jack witnessed horror given form. From the bulging black water rose a shape that defied comprehension, vast beyond measure, darker than the void, with geometries that hurt the human mind to perceive. Not a creature in any recognizable sense, but an entity of such cosmic wrongness that reality itself seemed to warp around it. Where it touched the platform's lower supports, metal simply ceased to exist, not melted or destroyed, but removed from reality entirely. Sections of the rig began to vanish, atomized by mere proximity to the awakening entity. "Now!" Jack shouted, slamming his hand down on the emergency override. The platform screamed as every pump and compressor activated simultaneously, systems redlining beyond all safety parameters. The stored serum, black, viscous, and faintly luminescent, flowed through hastily reconfigured pipes, driven downward toward the rupturing seabed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the emerging entity shuddered, its impossible form rippling with what might have been pain or surprise. The guardians circling above moved in concert, their bioluminescent patterns intensifying, joining the effort to reinforce the binding. "It's working," Morrison breathed. The platform lurched violently as another support vanished. Warning lights cascaded across the control panels. Structural failure imminent. Total collapse within minutes. "We need more," Jack said, watching the monitors. "The serum isn't enough." Morrison looked at him with strange serenity. "There is more serum," he said, touching his transformed flesh. "In us, in me." The experiments, he trailed off, but Jack understood. The platform chief moved to a different console, fingers dancing across controls. The drilling apparatus can be redirected. One final contribution. Jack realized what Morrison intended. There has to be another way. There isn't. The binding requires sacrifice. It always has. Morrison's silver eyes held an almost peaceful acceptance. This is why they changed us, prepared us, not as rulers of a new world, but as final guardians. The platform shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the window, Jack could see the massive entity retreating slightly, driven back by the serum injection, but not enough, nowhere near enough to restore the full binding. Morrison moved toward the exit.
Finish the sequence.
2 minutes after I reached the lower chamber. Activate the secondary drilling apparatus. Jack wanted to argue, to find another solution, but there was none. The math was undeniable. They needed more of the binding agent, and the only remaining source was in the transformed crew members themselves. "I'll go with you," Jack said. Morrison shook his head. "Someone must complete the sequence, and you are still fully human." He paused at the door. "If by some miracle you survive, make them understand. Make them stop drilling in the deep places. Some things are meant to stay buried." With that, he was gone, moving with inhuman speed through the disintegrating platform toward the lower drilling chamber. Jack turned back to the controls, setting the final sequence. 2 minutes, as promised. The secondary drilling apparatus had been modified to extract from a very different source. As he worked, Jack became aware of a presence behind him. He turned to find the chamber filled with the guardians, the entities they had mistaken for invaders. Up close, their beauty was breathtaking, their forms both alien and strangely familiar, as though representing an evolutionary path humanity might have taken in different circumstances. One approached, its bioluminescent patterns shifting to form recognizable symbols, a communication attempt. Jack didn't need his translation algorithm to understand the simple message. Gratitude. Warning. Remember. "I'll remember," Jack promised. "If I survive, I'll make them understand." The entity's light pulsed once in acknowledgement, then they were gone, returning to their positions around the platform as the final countdown approached. On the monitors, Jack watched Morrison reach the drilling chamber. The platform chief's transformed body moved with purpose as he connected himself to the modified equipment, becoming one with the machine designed to extract the very substance now flowing through his veins. The 2-minute mark arrived. Jack closed his eyes briefly, then activated the sequence. On the screen, Morrison's body convulsed as the drilling apparatus activated, extracting the serum directly from his transformed flesh. The substance flowed through the reconfigured pipes, joining the stream being injected into the rupturing seabed. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The emerging entity recoiled, its vast form shuddering as the binding reasserted itself. The guardians intensified their efforts, their bioluminescent patterns forming a network of light that encircled the retreating darkness. Then came the backlash. The platform's remaining supports gave way simultaneously. Warning klaxons blared for a second before cutting off as power failed completely. In the sudden silence, Jack felt the floor tilt beneath him as the rig began its final collapse into the depths. He had perhaps moments to live. Through the window, he watched the Guardians continue their work, reinforcing the binding as the ancient enemy retreated unwillingly to its prison beneath the seabed. The hurricane above, the gateway began to close, reality reasserting itself as the cosmic wrong was contained once more. Jack's last conscious thought was a hope that it had been enough, that Morrison's sacrifice had bought the world more time. Then darkness took him as Argus platform slipped beneath the waves. 3 months later, the official North Star Energy press release described the loss of Argus platform as a tragic accident caused by equipment failure during an unexpected hurricane. All hands lost, appropriate compensation to families, thoughts and prayers. Within a week, the story faded from the news cycle, replaced by fresher tragedies. In a secure North Star facility in Northern Virginia, Dr. Keller reviewed the final data packet received from Argus before its destruction. Most of it was corrupted, but fragments remained: sensor readings of the seabed, chemical analysis of the abyssal serum, and a partial audio recording. The voice was distorted, barely recognizable as Jack Harmon's. Not what you think, guardians of something worse. Drilling releases the binding. Morrison understood too late. If you continue, it will wake again. Serum contains. The recording ended there. Dr. Keller closed the file and opened another, satellite imagery of a new drilling site in the South Pacific, where depth readings suggested an even larger deposit of the serum might exist. On her desk sat a small vial of black liquid, faintly luminescent even in the bright office lighting. The last sample from Argus, recovered by a deep-sea drone, sent to investigate the wreckage. Analysis showed it contained compounds unknown to science, with energy storage potential beyond anything currently theorized. Worth billions, perhaps trillions, worth any risk. She picked up her secure phone and dialed a memorized number. "This is Keller. Operation Deep Crown is approved to proceed. Begin drilling next month." Far out in the North Atlantic, where Argus platform once stood, the ocean remained unnaturally calm, regardless of surrounding weather patterns. No marine life ventured within a mile radius of the site. Occasionally, passing ships reported instrument malfunctions and radio interference when navigating the area. Some sailors claimed to see lights beneath the water, moving in complex patterns. Others reported hearing voices, sometimes singing, sometimes warning. Most disturbing were the transmissions occasionally picked up by maritime radio operators. A voice identifying itself as Jack Harmon, warning ships away from the area, speaking of guardians rising in the night, of ancient pacts broken by human greed, and of the fragile balance that kept something far worse contained beneath the ocean floor. These reports were collected, filed, and ultimately dismissed by North Star's security division. Just superstition, sea stories, nothing to interfere with progress and profit. But in the deepest trenches of the ocean floor, the Guardians continued their vigil, and within their transformed ranks swam new members, former humans who had witnessed cosmic truth and made their choice. Their bioluminescent patterns told a story for those who knew how to read it. The binding holds for now. The Ancient One sleeps again, but more restlessly than before. And in the South Pacific, drills prepare to pierce the deep places once more.